I think the headliner is the one that I added at the last minute, and it was the Lions.
Oh, okay.
Just because it's a couple of things, and part of it is the absence of Ben Johnson. But Jared Goff had a 6.9% passing touchdown rate last year. The best rate of his career before that was 5.9%. His career mark is 4.8%. So Goff, a clear outlier in terms of passing touchdowns. We also saw Jahmyr Gibbs take a huge step forward in rushing touchdowns. The Lions scored more than everybody, basically. Sam Laporta, very high touchdown rate. The only reason he was a top 12 tight end. And so I think there's more risk than what I see reflected in drafts with the Lions, partially because of Ben Johnson leaving, partially because even if Ben Johnson was there, we should probably expect them to score fewer touchdowns next year.
I always point out with Jameson Williams how many long touchdowns he had. I don't know if that's the kind of thing that you look at.
For sure, yes.
Yeah, 6 touchdowns of 35 or more yards, and only Ja'Marr Chase had more. Chase had 7. So I know Williams is capable of doing that, but how many targets did Ja'Marr Chase have? He had so many, and Williams had like 100 or
91.
91? Yeah, he was on pace for 103.
And Jameson probably isn't, like, he had 7 on 91 targets, which is an unsustainable rate. I don't generally predict or project any wide receiver to have higher than a 7% touchdown rate. A few of them will, but very few people besides Mike Evans do that year after year. Williams probably isn't even the biggest touchdown regression candidate in his own wide receiver room. We saw Amon-Ra St. Brown score 5 and 6 touchdowns his first 2 years. It ballooned when Ben Johnson showed up to 10. I guess Ben Johnson was there for was in charge for half of the 22 season, right? But anyways, he had 10 on 164 targets in 2023. Last year, he had 23 fewer targets in one more game and scored 2 more touchdowns. So I think St. Brown also a pretty big regression candidate.
The thing that's interesting about the Lions, and the correlation I hope will happen, is what happened in Tampa Bay. So they lose, obviously, a hot commodity as an offense coordinator, not to the same level as Ben Johnson, but Dave Canales leaves, and Liam Cohen comes in, and I would say things got better.
Yeah, right, for sure.
And the thing that I'm hoping for the Lions, and I don't disagree with anything you're saying, Heath, but the thing that I'm hoping for with the Lions is that all these guys are in their prime. The offensive line is among the best in football. They still play in a very favorable environment. And I think, despite the fact that the defense is going to get better just from Hutchinson being back alone, but I think just the defense being better, because really when things took off was when Hutchinson and everybody fell apart. I mean, they just lost so many guys. But they're probably going to be in a lot of offensive type games, where they're not going to just sit back and, be conservative. I just don't see that happening for them. So I hope that while there will be some regression in certain areas, that these guys are still in such good spots that they'll continue to be close to the same level of production, if not maybe exactly the same level of production. Won't happen, but, in certain cases you could see it. Because, again, all these guys are still in such great situations. If they were losing personnel, it'd be a little bit more concerning, like clearly offensive linemen, changing teams or, not being back. For the most part, it's the same crew.
Is there anyone in particular that you think is being overdrafted?
Pretty much all of the Lions,
including Gibbs and St. Brown, who are first-round picks.
Yeah, I don't see it that way.
I would draft Gibbs in the first round, but I don't have him as high at running back as other people do, and I have St. Brown early in round 2. So yeah, all of them.
I would also point out that Jared Goff, his last 4 games of the year, of the fantasy season, he scored 28, 51, 31, and 32 points in 6-point per passing touchdown leagues. He threw 14 touchdowns. He had a quiet week 18. But if you recall, in the month of December, the Lions had one of the worst defenses in NFL history for any month, and that's not an exaggeration. In terms of like yards per play allowed, they allowed 31, 48, 17, and 34 points. So that, I don't know if you got how much you guys look at that, but that I think contributed to all of the passing and all of the shootouts.
I think a really important comment just to help people understand regression too. Darth Twerk says, top regression candidate, my hairline. And see, my hairline has already started to regress. So if it continues to regress, that would not be regression. It's moving away from what it used to be.
Yeah.
It's just continuing to go down the same path. If regression for my hairline would be coming back, which is very unlikely.
They have, products for that, Heath.
I'm not gonna. That's not the kind of thing I would do.
All right. So Heath is a little bit lower on the Lions, but still high on the Lions.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Jamie is fine with St. Brown and Gibbs where they're going and pretty early in the first round. Dave, how do you feel in general about the Lions?
I kind of feel the same way that Jamie does. I think that this is an offense that can continue to put up big points week in and week out. And I think they're going to be in a lot of high scoring games. The guy that I get a little worried about is David Montgomery, because he doesn't fit into the explosive scoreboard shootout type of game script the same way that other Lions do. He can always score. And I think when you start David Montgomery in fantasy, you use a pen, you use ink to give him a touchdown every single week. It's what else he can do on top of that. Last year, he did a bunch. This year, I'm wondering if that goes down a little bit. I think there's value in Jared Goff. I know that on Fantasy Pros, he's the 10th QB off the board. In our fan mock drafts, he's currently the 15th quarterback off the board.
Wow.
Amazing value for a guy who shouldn't fall below 20 points per game. But if they do what we think they're going to do, and it's just going to be so easy for Morton, their new play caller, to say, all right, we've got all these weapons on offense. Let's just keep airing it out, whether they need to or not. Man, I could see Jared Goff being an extremely good value while his ADP plummets because he's not sexy. He doesn't have the upside, the perceived upside of a Caleb Williams or a Kyler Murray or maybe even a Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, just Goff could be great value. He threw for 4,629 yards and 37 touchdowns, and it was QB 8 per game. So it's hard to see him being like 5th per game. What's that?
He didn't run very much.
No, and he won't. He had 56 rushing yards.
Don't forget his receiving touchdown.
That's true. It's funny because David Montgomery, I think, is one of the only Lions that has a chance to outperform his ADP.
I couldn't agree more.
Right? He's been
he's such a good bargain.
Game twice in a row.
Yep.
And in fact, he was RB 10 or 11 per game at the time of his injury, and then ended up as RB 15 per game. But that doesn't mean everything will stay the same. I mean, if they have a bigger role for Gibbs, maybe they have a smaller role for Montgomery. We don't know.